Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a really puzzling musical question. Why can't Wagnerians count to 5? I understand that bees can count to 4. And if bees can count to 4, Wagnerians should be able to count to 5, it seems to me. There's one obvious answer, but I'll get to that in a minute. The reason I asked the question is because, as most of you probably know, we've been doing a wonderful series of, the 5 greatest this or that lists. And I've been asking you to all contribute your lists of 5. And most of you do. Every so often we get honorable mentions and things like that you just hate to be limited to 5. I get it. But that's totally different from the fascinating inability of Wagnerites or Wagnerians or Wagnerniks or whatever you want to call them to count to 5. This came up in the context of the 5 greatest Wagner tenors. Held in tenors. It's not like there are lots of them. There really aren't. And it didn't cause as much of an issue with Wagnerian sopranos for some reason. But the tenors, I don't get it. Now, opera people are crazy. We know that they're crazy. We know that opera people are just loons. And they go bats over singers and this and that, and they argue with each other and with everything, and they don't like rules. And Wagnerians particularly don't like rules because Wagner was a rule breaker. Remember, he was a fugitive for much of his life, running away from this or that, and musically speaking, he was, of course, a revolutionary. So maybe part of that revolutionary edge rubbed off. And when I said, limit yourself to 5, just pick 5, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. But part of the problem also is that Wagnerites have to be the smartest people in the room. And they're constantly in competition with each other to show which of them can have prove themselves the most devoted to, Der Meister, to the cult of Wagner. So it's always a question of who knows more. And so a lot of people just had to list every name they've ever heard of who was a tenor, who happened to sing Wagner. I've never had so much fun deleting people's comments because I said, just give me 5 names. All you have to do is give me 5 names. Very, very simple, right? But they can't do 5. Either they did 1 or 2 because those were the greatest ever and everyone else was unworthy of mention, or they did everybody they've ever heard of because you can't limit yourself to 5. There's something wrong or evil about the number 5. And that's something that hit me as I was working on, reading all these comments. Wagner himself couldn't count to 5. That was the problem, because when he wrote The Ring, he only counted to 4. There are 4 operas in The Ring. It's a tetralogy. And so anything beyond that is simply inconceivable. It's not that they couldn't count to 5. It's that there is no number beyond 4, you see. So I could get a list of 1 or 2 tenors, or maybe 4 tenors. But then after that, it's chaos. They're all the same, whether it's 50 tenors or 6 tenors or 8 tenors or 23 tenors. It doesn't matter because it's greater than the number 4. And therefore, it doesn't exist. It's all this sort of jumbled thing that, they can't quite wrap their brains around. I really think that was it. Maybe they should go take a lesson from bees about how to count. Anyway, so that was one issue as well. I'm absolutely convinced that that was one issue. Then the other issue is, and it's part of the, anything you can list, I can list better, competition thing. It was this. Instead of limiting themselves to tenors who have actually made recordings that we can all listen to and confirm and verify for ourselves, which is the whole point of this exercise. The whole point of these lists is to put together a really interesting playlist of names so that people who may not be familiar with the concept can go and get recordings and sample them themselves and draw their own conclusions and build up their repertoire. I mean, that's really the idea. However, in this particular case, there was a whole batch of people who decided to list every performance they've ever heard that they ever liked. I mean, this isn't about what you like. This is about taking a step back and determining who the greatest exemplars of a certain category of musical performance are. But instead, we get, oh, well, I was passing through the Bremen train station about 14 years ago, and there was a beggar with a parrot on his shoulder, and that parrot was singing Parsifal, and it was the greatest performance of Parsifal that I have ever heard, whether done by a human being or a parrot. And I'm the only one who's ever heard it, and so nobody can ever challenge me when I tell you it was the greatest thing ever, and that belongs on the list of greatest ever. Or, it was that sort of thing. I saw a performance of something somewhere, which is gone forever and never was recorded, but that was the greatest. And so he's on my list of greatest Wagnerian tenors. What a pleasure it was to delete those comments, because there were quite a few of them. It really, really astonished me. I mean, you would think this is very simple. Just make a list. It's, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like Sesame Street. 5 is such a pretty number. I'm awfully glad that I've 5 fingers on my, or 5 members of my family. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, right. That was the way it went, didn't it? A mother, a father, a brother, a sister, and me. Okay, it's just 5. So anyway, the other reason we couldn't get 5 was, amongst the people who did do 5, there were the people who demanded that it be either greater or lesser, not just because they were the smartest people in the room, but because they hated the selections on other people's lists. Hated with violence and vituperation, and then with a absolutely world-ending apocalyptic fury. How dare you say that such and such belongs amongst the great Wagnerian tenors? Oh, no, that's impossible. I heard him in 1962 singing in the bathroom at Bayreuth, and it was the most horrible thing I've ever heard in my life. Oh, my God. I mean, so there was that aspect of it, too. But it was really, really interesting, because in all of these list things that we've been doing recently, and there have been a few dozen of them, this was the only one that went completely haywire in terms of the comments. Of course, most of the kooky ones are gone now, so it's the normal people who contributed have, their comments are still there. But I still see some of them coming, by the way. They're still working on it, Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And it must say something about the cult of Wagner that these people find it absolutely incapable of following simple instructions. What is it about Wagner that completely discombobulates these people? I can't even begin to guess. But it's a phenomenon. It happens. And so I thought I would mention it so that you would all understand what's going on and how much extra work it makes for me, because I have to sit down and read all this twaddle and then try and make something cohesive out of the comment sections. I mean, it's kind of fun too. I mean, I love doing it, obviously, and I am eternally grateful for all the participation. But sometimes you really have to wonder, what is going on with this composer and his people, because they are not normal. They're just not. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.